All right. It's Mark Horn here with Andrew Isker. Andrew, thank you for being with me, virtually, as it were.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
so we're going to continue through Genesis 1, and I believe we're on day 6. So I'll just read, I guess, 24 to 26, and then we'll talk about it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've got my NASB, you got the NKJV as usual, and for no other reason, those are the Bibles we have in hand. So I'm using my Kindle today, so that's different. Anyway, all right. So the text reads, Then God said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. So I don't, I've not been reading NASD as my regular Bible. I just started using it for these videos for some reason. So sometimes it seems something strikes me, and I wish I had time to check out more. But I'll have to check out the term living creatures. I think those are the names given to angels around the throne in Revelation, and maybe in somewhere else. But at least Revelation, I'll have to see if it's like a close link between the Septuagint and the Hebrew and the Greek, but it sounds very similar. The word animal comes from the idea of the spirit, this animating force. It's actually this living is kind of goes back to that. It's part of related to that root, so animal, obviously from Latin. But in any case, moving creatures, self-motivating creatures, and living creatures. And I remember that we talked about how day 2 was the one day where there was no um, God's evaluation. God saw that it was good. And the reason day 2 was not called good, we talked about the possibility that it was because there was a division put between heaven and earth that was meant to eventually be erased. It was like the earth was being created in an immature stage. But then we noticed on day 3 that there were 2 evaluations. There were 2 times where God saw that it was good, both when he divided the land from the sea and made dry land appear, and then when he had plants grow. And the same thing in day 6 here. This first God does 2 things, and they're both evaluated as good separately, though the last thing that said is it's all very good, so maybe everything is included in that, not just man. But the point is that there's still two evaluations. So it seems to be some commonality or parallelism, excuse me, between day 3 and day 6. And we talked about the structure of this. That one possibility of looking at it is it's days 1, 2, and 3 are parallel to 4, 5, 6. So that'd be creation of light, division of heaven and earth, and then sea and dry land with vegetation on the land, and then stars, birds and fishes, and then now, in which case the first stage is animal life and the second stage is mankind. And what also, and all that is background, because that terminology, let the earth bring forth, again, I need to check the Hebrew, but it sounds a lot like what he said about when he created plants, let the earth produce, let the earth bring forth plants and herbs. So I don't know if that's what actually happened. When C.S. Lewis is The Magician's Nephew, he actually has the earth bubble up and animals like pop out of the ground, but I don't think that it doesn't say that he necessarily did that, but the way his language initially seems to indicate something like that could happen, but then it just says God made the beast, so I'm not sure. Anyway, so those are some things that just struck me. So please interrupt if you have any. But he was, and then we have the different kinds of beasts, beasts of the earth, cattle, and every creeper. The creepers, the burrowing and creeping animals. And I think later on, like in Noah's flood, we talked about the three-decker universe.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we'd put birds in there and fish, would be part of that. The lowers the fish, uppers the birds. We can also kind of do it with the creepers versus other animals, because the creepers, it talked about birds going to the ark and the beasts of the earth and creepers, and there's 3 floors on the ark. Now it doesn't say that they're like apportioned that way, but it just gives you those associations.
Yeah.
When we come to Genesis 2, we're going to have God, I think, do some extra work of creation, but what he's going to have to make for Adam to name or beasts of the earth, that the cattle that he names apparently was already there. It's like a sanctuary creature. It's already in the garden. So doesn't seem that important, I guess, in terms of like a lesson here per se, but it does kind of get used in the Bible. Again, if you're going to start doing a study on what the dietary laws mean and what it means when eventually Peter sees that he's supposed to eat all the animals of different types, it all kind of ties together. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say.
No, I think, exactly. I think you have this tripartite division here. That the fact that there's a division into 3 is not random. I mean, nothing in the Bible, of course, nothing in the Bible is random. So you have this division into 3 between beasts of the earth, then cattle, or really just domestic animals. I think that when the Bible uses that word for cattle, it isn't just cows or bovines, but any kind of domestic animal. Goats, lamb.
Right.
Yep, exactly. And then things that creep on the earth, everything that's low to the ground, whether it's lizards or snakes or in the water, crustaceans, and that's the taxonomy of creatures. And it's funny because it's not, we have the modern one where you have Linnaeus assigning the animal kingdom the way it goes and everything else, but the Bible is a little bit different. The Bible is the way the taxonomy works is this way. Is it a domestic animal? Is it something that's low to the earth? And then the beasts of the earth is just everything else in between. And we see this at the very beginning of Genesis. And you can go to Leviticus 11 and kind of have that as the interpretive lens to understand this, or to understand animals in general, and peoples too. But I think you see the beginnings here, the way that God made it, and these 3 types of animals you see at the very end of verse 25, that God created them good. These animals, the snakes slithering on the ground, and well, maybe
we don't know the snakes slithered yet.
Maybe they weren't slithering yet. Yes.
We don't know about the snake in particular, but there were some other things that are slithering or
but
crawling.
the bugs that are crawling on the ground,
worms,
and worms digging through the dirt, and the shrimp that are crawling around the bottom of the ocean floor. God created those good. Those were good.
Yep.
And
which is why there's your picture.
There we go.
So let's just establish something, by the way. That means that by definition, almost, the dietary laws had to be a temporary parenthesis.
Precisely. Absolutely.
We should expect it to be taken away again, because they're all good. They're not clean and unclean. That's not really a statement about their moral worth or something like that. It's just something done for maybe pedagogical reasons, to teach people. But
as a result we're not quite to the fall yet, but I'd say the beginning of the dietary law is the beginning of it is the fall, or even when there's division between, we're getting way ahead, but sons of God versus the daughters of men, sons of men.
All right.
Right. You see that division, and you also see the division between clean and unclean. Even before Moses, you see it in with Noah. God commands him to put clean animals on the ark. Well, how is he supposed to know? It precedes Babel too. I mean, Babel is kind of, all of these things kind of bleed into one another, but we'll flesh those out when we cross those.
I was afraid you'd bring up probably the passage is the most controversial ever about the sons of God and the sons of men, but I agree with you. Anyway,
No, we'll get there.
and
Yeah.
I think, and with Noah, I think we'll see the only time we see a sacrifice that includes a gazelle. I mean, it's
Hmm.
interesting. It's very much a Gentile thing, but
Hmm.
we'll
Hmm.
get there. Um, so that's the first thing God does. On the sixth day, He makes living creatures, and they reproduce. They are meant to after their kind, and He's already He's created winged birds, and He's blessed them. So we're getting to, like, as I said before, getting all the elements whereby we're going to have human beings as the climax of this whole process. So why don't you read uh, 26 to well, why don't just read verse 26 for us? It's a long verse.
Yep. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth."
All right. So I talked to you about this before we started the video, but there's been a lot of question about who is God talking to when He says, "Let us make man in our image."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you have a big log interview that I thought would intercept with some of this stuff on your. It's all right. I mentioned you have a YouTube channel. I hope.
Yes. Yeah. So
Oh, good, good. Because I just
yeah,
said, didn't you interview Chris
yeah,
Coe about this?
I did. Yeah, Chris
About
Cohen, I talked.
about what I should say about a theme in Scripture that might be in evidence here.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think Chris would concur that when God is speaking with this, it isn't just that the persons of the Trinity are speaking together amongst themselves, which of course they are. They certainly are, but that you have the heavenly host, you have this divine council, you have all of heaven, the the beings that God has created, there with Him in His council that He's speaking to, and He's saying, let us create man in our image." And of course, the hour is not merely this divine image, but um, in the image of God, of course. But in this passage, it's is He speaking to Himself, or is He speaking to His counsel? Is not really clear on its own. But then when you take the rest of Scripture and all of these other passages that lend credence to this concept of the divine counsel, it becomes at least plausible that that's what's going on here.
Well, I haven't watched your video yet. Do you have a channel? What is it? Do you want to tell people how to find it?
Yeah, maybe we probably the easiest way to find it. I'll make sure you post the link in
I'll post a link. I already planned that,
on
but
this
all
video.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay, well, here,
if they Google me, maybe they'll find it. I'm not sure. I maybe have made it too hard to find, but that's okay.
all right, I'll do the link. But here's the thing. I don't know if you guys talked about Isaiah 6, but that's a case where God says, in the presence of all these angels, He says,
Mm-hmm.
"Who will go out for us?" And Isaiah says,
Yes.
"Send me." So it
Yeah.
seems like He's talking to the people. And also in Genesis, though itself,
Mm-hmm.
when God appears to Abraham as God and two angels just appearing as
Mm-hmm.
human beings, as far as we know. I mean, it seems like He
Yes.
did not recognize them as He did not recognize who He was dealing with at first,
Yeah.
because the New Testament assumes He didn't, because it talks about showing hospitality to angels unawares. So,
Or I mean, we
God,
also talked about Job chapter 1. We talked
oh
about
yeah, but
Second
the point
Kings
is, in
with Ahab. We talked about Psalm 82,
all
and
right,
Deuteronomy 32. All of these. Yep, exactly.
yeah, but in that one passage, it's God again asking questions about what shall we do, and should,
Yeah.
it's like having a conversation with these two other angels.
Yes.
Now, of
Yep.
course, I mean, I think some people get hung up on the idea that means, we're in the image of God and the angels. But my understanding, see, I was introduced to this all, well, I mean, when I started like reading a real thick work on it, I was reading, I guess, Klein, Meredith Klein,
Okay. Yep.
who's
Yep.
somewhat, I mean, I don't follow Klein on all things, let's just put it that way. But he did, I guess, Image of the Spirit. I think he argued that the glory cloud is God's throne and it's surrounded by angels. You know, it's this whole like mass, and it all together is, in the sense of the theophany. It's the image of God. It's that spirit hovering over the waters that we talked about in Genesis 1:1. And that, you know, in Revelation, it basically tells you that Jesus in his body is the true theophany. He is that, the image of God. My point is that God and his angels together is really, it makes up the image of God. It's God who's being manifest, that theophany, some kind of finite representation of
Or yeah, if you
God
think
in
of
that
like
way.
Ezekiel and you know the cherubim and the chariots and
Yeah.
all the same thing. Yeah, they're part and parcel. You know, God and the
Yeah.
heavenly host are together in that way, and how God is images himself is, you know, in this glory, in this splendor. I mean, whether it is there, whether it's in Revelation, where exactly, it's
So it's
that
not
way.
like saying that God and the angels look exactly the same, and we're as much as
Mhm.
the image of angels. And I don't think it has that kind of I think it's more nuanced than that, and
Yeah,
it
it's
gives
not
you
that
still a unique image of
theological
God.
point. Yeah, it's not like
Right.
that the angels are on par with God
Yeah.
himself or anything like
And
that.
it
But yeah,
related to us.
let no one
Yeah.
understand it that way at all.
Though
You
though I
know,
used to insist that we had no reason to believe the angels were the image of God at all, and then later it started to occur to me that the angels are called sons of God,
yeah,
which is also what Adam's called. So I don't, you know, it just, oh well.
yeah,
So that's just one possibility, a little bit speculative, but he
yeah.
talks that way. Now, I'll just say something about this that will apply to all the rest. This idea that God wants to make a creature, a living creature, in his image to rule over the fish and everything else. Well, that I think is actually a really significant thing, because we know that God was the ruler of everything,
Yeah,
and God was
yeah.
ruling over the fish and the cattle and the beasts, and he doesn't want that. That's not enough. He wants someone else to do it, if you will. And obviously, though, not someone like him. This is going to be a limited creature. There's going to be finite, time-bound people, right? So, to me, this is kind of, I kind of got this while I was working on Proverbs, and I didn't put it in there because it was kind of seemed philosophical and all. It just seemed, I didn't know how to make the turns. I just left it out, kind of, at least in the background or whatever. But what we're doing every day is that we're ruling. And if you don't think you're ruling, you're just wrong. You're ruling. That's what you are. You're a human being. You're a ruler over stuff. And I follow the questionable theologian John Locke in saying that, you know, when you think about how the dominion given to the human race worked itself out in individuals, it's through kind of this homesteading, property,
Yeah.
living, trading, working, gaining the authority that you can gain through godly means, etc. And in a sense, I want to take that. And there's also something I kind of got from Jordan Peterson, who's even worse than John Locke, and better. But you know what I'm saying. He's not a Christian
Yeah, no,
theologian. But
absolutely. No, I know
I
precisely what
don't
you mean.
remember, and I don't remember how he said it. He said it in some weird Peterson way that I wouldn't use. But he basically kind of gave the idea. I mean, God's omniscient. He's omnipotent, and he doesn't need anything. But what would God be like? What would God be like if he was? And now the answer, of course, is Sunday school answer, it's Jesus. But Jesus only answered the question in a particular way at a particular time. He was true God and true man, so he
Mm-hmm.
shows us God's character in a new way. But all of us, I think, just by the way we act in our circumstances, are saying something true or false about how God would act.
Yeah.
If God's the ruler and he wants us to rule after him and under him, that means we are really displaying something about him. We have the privilege and the responsibility to do, what would God do? I mean, now, I know that the what would Jesus do is kind of a cliche from a few years back. And I'm not saying that you answer the question like by imagining what you think Jesus would be like. You do it by reading scripture, including the gospel, so Jesus is in there. But
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
thing, Jesus himself had a particular calling, right? So if you're going to ask the question, what would Jesus do? You have to strip away his calling, his time, his place, and put him in yours, and that's almost not Jesus anymore. You might as well just say it. What would God do? What would God do tomorrow if he woke up and he were me, with my memories, with my responsibilities, and with my past? And it's a silly question in one sense, but I think that is really the key. We
Yeah.
are answering that question whether we think about it or not when we get up tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. We don't always. God has, he has a PR concern. He's going to discuss it with us on Judgment Day. Are we representing him correctly? But there's a passage in Acts that when the disciples are first, I think, flogged, that they went away rejoicing because they were counted worthy to suffer for the name. And I have a feeling that there's a more general creational way that honor can be understood. Yes, they were following Jesus and preaching Jesus, so they were suffering for Jesus in the particulars of the gospel. But all of us are made in the image of God, and all of us the trials we have are God's honoring us, that we're worthy to suffer for the name, to have his image on us, to be his image in the world. So I don't know. I think that's a great honor, and I think that's just saw a quote from J.I. Packer, which I'm gonna butcher, but he said if you ask like why stuff is happening, you're not necessarily gonna get any answer. But if you ask how can I glorify God with what I'm dealing with in my situation, there will always be an answer to that. Yeah. And I think that's so. Basically, all this stuff that is involved in ruling, that's our heritage, that's our destiny, that's our privilege, and it's hard to think about it that way. But so I don't know if I'm being clear, but I just think that image of God and ruler.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I one way I think of it, especially in terms of Proverbs, and the themes of the book of Proverbs, the things you were saying reminded me of the movie, The Martian. Have you seen this movie with?
No, I haven't.
Oh my goodness, I can't think of the actor's name. Matt Damon. And he's basically, there are a bunch of astronauts that are on Mars, and he gets stranded on Mars, and he basically has to homestead the planet Mars. He finds a vacuum sealed potato, and plants the potato and grows more potatoes to survive, and figures out a way to survive. It's basically a Robinson Crusoe on Mars, and it makes me think, like, here he is, he's taking dominion of this place, of this planet, and that's to one degree or another, whether or not we're actually homesteading a plot of land and growing crops and doing all of that, with whatever we're doing, we're contributing to that end. We're taking dominion of what God has given us, and that is what, if God is in our shoes, right? If God inhibits our bodies and has our, like you said, has our memories and is in our shoes, walking a mile in our shoes, what would he do? Well, that's what our calling is to do. He would rule. He would rule whatever and wherever we are, because that's how we're made. We're made to be like him. and He's given us things to rule. That is, I guess you could say the sine the or what it means to
Sine
be
qua,
a,
yeah,
sine qua
human
non.
being.
Yeah, that's right. What it means to be a human being, right, is to
And
rule
yeah,
more than anything
and
else.
that's
Yeah,
why I brought up Locke, was because I want to talk about, we get, it's not, ruling is not something that's just our destiny, maybe ruling better or getting more glory is, but no, ruling
hmm
is something we're doing. I mean, slaves are not exempt from that.
whether we do it well or poorly it's what we're
Oh
doing.
yeah, that
Yeah,
too. But
yeah,
even if we
yeah,
don't have any outward authority, we still have our own bodies to rule. We have little
yeah.
things. So we're not exempt. We're not saying, and we shouldn't say, well, you know, I can't wait till God does that, gives me that. That's no, you're a human being. You do it now.
Yeah.
You know. So all right. Well, that's something I thought was important to bring out. And so
Yeah.
I'll read
We
verse
got good. We got a
27.
good 15 minutes out of one verse.
Oh,
That's always
all
good.
right.
Yeah.
So then God has said this is the plan, so then he executes it in verse 27. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And I'll go ahead and just finish out this paragraph. Then God
Okay.
said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, which has life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. So, um, obviously, this story is going to get detailed and kind of expanded upon right here, because, for instance,
hmm
the fact that Eve heard God say, "I've given you every tree to eat," and Adam had to say, "By the way, Eve, there's that one over there that gets killed." That's significant. But
hmm
right now, he creates man and woman together. Um, they're both in the image of God, and together they're in the image of God.
hmm
Plurality and unity, which kind of, you know, harkens back to the idea that there's a kind of a Trinitarian um, message in that.
Yeah.
Um, but in any case, he makes man. They are together in his image, both male and female. And he gives this commission about rule, and he also tells them that they're to spread out and multiply, and they're to take dominion. And so, as this is something that's in my book, the second chapter is I thought Solomon's two big temptations in chapters 1 through 9 of Proverbs, um, which is the first one is to not be a robber. The first temptation is the robbery, to live by plunder. And the second temptation is to commit adultery. Now, there's other temptations mentioned in those chapters, but there's only two that are like where Solomon starts imitating the voice of the tempter. He starts
hmm
speaking their words for them. And so you've got the twin evils that he wants to protect a young man against is living by plunder, robbery, theft, and adultery. And I took that as a key into the Great Commission, the two things that you're made for from the male point of view, and actually from a human point of view, the way I'm saying it, but especially
hmm
from a young man's perspective, is
hmm
work and wife, right?
Yep.
You've got to work and you've got to get married. And by the way, I mean, not everyone is called to marriage. I mean, again, there's that
hmm
thing where not every individual is going to have this destiny precisely, but it does show you
hmm
the contours of human society and also kind of human personality. Even if you're
hmm
not going to be a husband, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to be good husband material. It's kind of it's a benchmark for what it means to be a good
hmm
and mature man. So, or a
hmm
woman for that matter. So in any case, and I think, what's funny about this is I've seen articles I think the Federalist did one of these last year or the year before about, no, it's not racist to say that work and marriage are important to escaping poverty. Sociologists and behavioral scientists, they talk about this stuff. Charles Murray's Coming Apart was about this.
Yep. Yeah.
Book. It's actually a pretty amazing book. I was surprised.
Yeah.
That these are both things that nurture a human, like make a person be a full person.
Yeah.
And also provide for other people, literally, and literally in both ways. Provide more people or make more people into existence, bring them into existence, and also provide for them.
And provide for them. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a fundamental thing that we're all supposed to be part of. Again, sometimes, like I said, you got to find a willing partner and all that. So there's bound to be other callings that people have sometimes, but this is a basic calling. And a human society, if it's going to flourish, needs to be full of it: work and marriage. So, other than that, the only thing I've noticed is it seems like they're vegetarian so far, but that kind of bothers me. But we'll get past
that. Yes. I lost you there for a second. Well, yeah. I mean, setting the vegetarian thing aside, I remember being in college, and I was in a history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam class at a public university here in Minnesota. And I remember the professor, this cretinous, blasphemous woman, going through. We read Genesis 1 and 2, and I was already, I'd grown up in the church and been a serious Christian for a while, and I was annoyed by this woman. But she read Genesis 1 and then she reads Genesis 2, and I mean, this is maybe a preview for next time, but she reads Genesis 2 and says, just the typical critical liberal account that Genesis 1 is one account of creation, and then Genesis 2 is a completely different one, and they conflict, and they don't. And this proves that the Bible is made up and fake, and only idiots, would believe that the Bible is actually, genuine. And I'm sitting there listening to this, thinking, you don't think that there's possibly a way that you could reconcile these two things? Like, you don't think that chapter 2 is just a further explanation of what is going on in verses 26 through 31 of chapter 1? That was I remember raising my hand in the class and saying, hey, isn't just chapter 2 further explanation of what's going on and at the very end in the creation of man? No. And so it was, I mean, hilarious is not the right word, because it was so awful, because here's this woman who's being paid by my tax money to attack the faith of very vulnerable young Christians. But it was hilarious in the sense that it was so preposterous, that it was such a ridiculous attempt that, I mean, it was so easily argued against. And all it took was just, I mean, I wasn't, especially at 21 years old, wasn't that bright. All it took was just a little either idiocy on my part or courage to push back and say, are you sure this is what's going on? But I mean, this is the kind of thing that gets pushed a ton. I mean, it wasn't just unique to my situation at Minnesota State University. It's everywhere. I mean, everywhere. This is the kind of stuff that gets pushed. And Genesis chapter 2 is, it is just this more detailed further explanation of the creation of Adam and Eve, of the covenant that God has made with man.
Yeah, what's odd about that is, these stories have been together for as long as we have history. I mean, we don't know of a time when they're floating independently of one another. So why hasn't anyone on Earth been bothered by this before now? I mean, it's not like they're saying that they've discovered new information. I mean, they're talking about the text of the stand. It was, I mean, let me put it this way. if there's differences, they were actually put there deliberately to be meditated upon. That's
Yeah.
it's intentional stuff. So
Yeah,
I
for
don't.
sure.
I can't
That was the
even.
thing. Yeah, that was the thing I thought too. I'm like, and my attitude was the Bible has been around for thousands of years, and it took until you discovered that, oh, this apparent contradiction, and aren't you so smart that you figured this out? Everybody was so
Yeah.
stupid before you. I mean, that was my attitude, and maybe that's what got me through college without, just being Teflon, like not being able to, being vulnerable to what these people thought at all, because I thought they were all idiots, and not only idiots, but also liars and people that were my enemy, basically.
No.
And so I took everything with a grain of salt, with many grains of salt that they ever said. But I mean, this is just widespread of the attitude that people have in the academy towards Scripture. But that's just it. Is that it's that you have. I look at it. I think you have some of the most brilliant minds in recorded history. Saint Augustine and Aquinas and Calvin and all these ones that take the Bible very, very seriously. And
Sorry.
and we have a special guest. And here is this 115 IQ college professor that cracked the code, figured out it was all fake. That I think like
Yeah.
that. I don't know. As I think about my children, one of which just stopped by, one day if they're ever in university, especially if they're ever in a public university, the thought is that they have to look at this, that this person is hostile to everything that you love, and you need to not treat them as a source of intellectual authority, because they don't have it. But I mean, going back to Genesis, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's only going to be very relevant when we talk about what the discourse is in Genesis 3.
Yeah.
How the serpent talks to Eve, and how I just preached on that
Yes.
recently.
Yes.
So we'll actually be able to get some more into that pretty quick here. Well, how long have we been doing this?
Oh,
About
almost
we probably
close to 45 minutes. Yeah, nice and long.
Yeah. Why don't we stop there, and we'll just finish up Genesis and finish up day 7. I mean, we ended a chapter, but we're not through. The section kind of ends, I think, after verse 2 or verse 3. So anyway,
3. We'll finish
right
up
there,
day 7
and
here,
we'll do that later. But
and
thank you,
hopefully the
Andrew,
next time. Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, hopefully the next time we can get into all of Genesis 2, and the next get through the whole chunk of it, because there is so much. I mean, all of this, so much more. Yeah. We
I
can go
think
on
Age
for
of
much
Miracles
longer.
has ended, so I don't think it's going to happen, Andrew. But we'll try.
Yeah.
Okay. So, hey, thanks. I hope everyone benefited from this. And Andrew, I will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.